Hey, welcome everyone to the 15th session of Sitecore Headless user group. My name is Martin Miles, and today we have a very interesting speaker. His name is Luke Pace. I used to work with Luke, and that's probably one of the most advanced DevOps engineers I ever worked with. It was a pleasure to work with you, Luke, in the past. Today, Luke brought us a very interesting topic about Vercel and XM Cloud. I think it's a super combination of all of your findings over the past couple of years working with XM Cloud. Am I right saying that?
Yeah, I'd say so. And thanks for having me, Mark. So yeah, just to go back a second, I've been doing Sitecore about 8 years now. I technically started as a backend developer, which was very short-lived. I did that for maybe a year, and then very quickly moved into the need for DevOps. So that's been my primary focus for the majority of my Sitecore career. And a lot of that's been XM Cloud recently. Had done a lot of projects, so kind of summarizing some of the things that I found myself and the teams that I worked with over the last few years.
Awesome. So without extra sentiments, the stage is yours. Please
All
share your
right.
screen. You're
Okay.
good to go?
Good to go. All right. So I've called this Lean, Fast, and Fresh Sitecore XM Cloud on Vercel, and we're just going to jump right in. So first, Sitecore XM Cloud provides a lot of flexibility with its layout service and GraphQL APIs, but flexibility can very easily lead to unnecessarily large responses. So we're going to talk about some strategies for how you can reduce those payloads and load times. And to pause for a second, kind of set a tone for this entire presentation. In this kind of landscape of running an XM Cloud, running things on the edge and distributed, speed is, I wouldn't say inherent, but it's a lot easier to obtain now. And so as more and more companies move towards um, these SaaS environments and these applications distributed across the edge and continue to gain more and more performance, small differences are going to become largely impactful in different industries for how you stack up against your competition. So a lot of the things we're going to talk about today will probably give you small gains. None of the hopefully these are you're already at a point where your application is fairly performant. So we're talking about those extra little things that you can look for to really drive you even further into the optimal performance and really kind of edge out any competition you may have. So going back to the layout services in GraphQL. So first, trim those JSON responses from the layout service. So you might have included extra placeholders or renderings in layouts that you're not actually using in your front end. Maybe they're left over from a migration or from some testing, or when a component was going through some development. So removing those unused elements, as well as any unnecessary internal metadata, maybe like some analytics or some tracking fields that you're not using, can reduce that JSON payload size. Next, tailor your output to your front end needs. So ensuring that only renderings that are actually used by the front end are included in your route definitions is going to minimize the hydration work, improve runtime rendering speeds, and especially critical for headless apps that are running on Next.js or React, which are probably going to be your most common ones. Next is keep your GraphQL queries efficient. So GraphQL offers very precise querying, but it's also very easy to overfetch if you're not intentional with that. So you can get too much data. So retrieve only the fields that your UI needs. Use pagination arguments like first or limit to avoid large result sets. And use GraphQL fragments to keep queries modular, dry, and consistent across your components. Because a smaller payload is going to equal faster hydration. So the less data you're having to move across and request back from Experience Edge and transfer, the faster that your website's going to be. Next, so Sitecore XM Cloud And being composable and headless in architecture, there's a few different rendering strategies, and it's essential to find a balance of uh, balancing the performance and personalization of these different methods to make your application um, perform as well as possible. So the three options are server-side rendering, static site generation, and ISR. And I'll also plug Martin's daily blog series he has going on. He had a nice summary of this as well. So first, server-side rendering. So that's used for content that's dynamic. Maybe it's tied to a user session or request content. Uh, so personalized pages, authentication areas, content authoring preview, etc. So this is having XM Cloud as having to fetch the live content from the Experience Edge and GraphQL at runtime. So this is really good for real-time accuracy when that matters more than load speed. And again, not saying this is going to be slow, but again, we're talking about those marginal differences that can really push you over the edge. Static site generation, ideal for content that rarely changes, that you need to deliver with maximum speed. So that content gets generated at build time. It's going to reduce your server costs, improve your time to first byte, and those static pages are generated from the published content in Experience Edge. So really good for business critical items that are maybe not personalized. So think about like your About Us page, product info page, maybe other pages where you're maybe running a promotion and you're driving a lot of content directly to those pages, and then maybe they don't need to be dynamic. And last is ISR. So that's kind of the middle ground where it's rebuilt in the background as the data gets updated. So it gives you the speed of static sites, but with a little bit of load on the back end of refreshing that page. So you could use this for maybe blogs, news feeds, event listings, and we'll talk about some other ways to kind of leverage that more efficiently. But the main point to remember from this is you can use a combination of all of these different rendering methods, and you should use a combination of these rendering methods when you're building your application. So it's really beneficial not to just start a project and run off and start building it without really thinking about what rendering methods you want to use. Doing that analysis of how is my website structured, where do I want my users to go, what's their journey going to be through the website, and where can I implement these different rendering strategies to really optimize my website performance. So what I was talking about was how do we kind of get the most out of ISR pages and some static pages as well. That's with on-demand revalidation. So what is ODR? ODR is a feature in Next.js that allows you to programmatically refresh pages, static pages or ISR pages without having to rebuild the entire site. So it enables you to do real-time updates via an API call. So this gives you performance benefits of static generation, but also the freshness of ISR. So why would you want to do this? So without ODR, you're going to have to either do a full rebuild of your application and deployment to refresh those static pages, or for ISR pages, you're going to have to wait for your predefined revalidation period to expire. And you want to be careful of, with ISR, of lowering that revalidation period too low, because then you're going to constantly be checking for revalidated pages or revalidated content or fresh content. So you're going to have to incur a lot of overhead constantly going back and forth to check. And in today's world, I think we've all become used to, we want everything now. We want to see changes, updates instantly. Whether that's, we've probably all been on projects where you're doing a deployment or testing a feature and you have content authors or QA clients, etc., who are waiting for something to be seen, and they're like, can we clear the cache? Can we, refresh, restart, because they're not seeing the changes right away. So we've all probably get a little bit like Veruca Salt and have been asked, like, we want things now, even in our personal lives. So how do we leverage ODR with XM Cloud? So XM Cloud supports publishing webhooks. So when an item gets published, this webhook could be triggered to send a payload to a custom endpoint in Vercel, which would probably be a serverless function, to call a revalidation route for all of the affected pages to, on publish, update that data in Experience Edge. So when that data gets updated, our static pages will be refreshed and be served, and then will cause our ISR pages to call that revalidate function, making them fresh as well. This does come with a catch, though. The catch is it does calling this webhook does trigger a serverless function. So if you're using like Vercel, serverless functions aren't free. Invocations of those do run usage against your subscription. So if you're running this a lot, then you can really eat up your usage in Vercel from your serverless function. So you kind of want to keep an eye on that if you get a good sense of what your content authors, how they're operating, and how this webhook is configured. Essentially, how broad its view is, because you don't want it to be eating up all of that usage. Next, we're going to go through a few different components of Next.js that can be somewhat quick wins from the code perspective to get some performance gains. So first is optimizing images with Next Image. So starting in version 20.1.0 of Sitecore JSS, it supports Next Image. So it makes it really easy to drop in optimized images across your headless project. The Next Image component automatically optimizes images for size and format and device resolution. And when you deploy this on Vercel, it's going to leverage edge-based image optimization to serve responsive compressed images without needing manual tuning. So it's going to reduce bandwidth and directly improve some of your core web vitals like largest content full paint, first content full paint. So you still need to set your width and height, so to avoid cumulative layout shift. So this will ensure that the space is reserved on the page before the image loads, keeping the layout stable. So when pulling image data from Sitecore, make sure your image rendering logic passes those dimensions to Next Image. But you can also still lazy load non-critical images for faster initial loads. So Next Image uses lazy loading by default for images that are not immediately visible in the viewport. So it's going to defer loading them until the user scrolls near them. So that's going to also improve your performance as well. Lastly, avoid unoptimized third-party images. Image sources when possible. So if you have your images hosted on third-party domains, that can introduce a TLS handshake and increase some latency there. So if they're compatible with Next.js image, they are not compatible with Next.js image optimization, you're going to lose those performance benefits. So when possible, host those images within your own domain or a trusted optimized source. You can whitelist domains in your Next.js config to allow safe transmission of those images. Next one is NextLink. So NextLink is a component, is a foundational optimization for any Next.js application, especially when you're running on a platform like Vercel that is really focused on edge speed. So when you use this correctly, it's going to shift routing from a full page reload to a lightweight client transition. And this can be done with some low code. I put an example down there, very watered down example, but essentially how quickly that you can implement this for a link in your website. So this component, it's again fundamental in Next.js. So it enables client-side transitions instead of full page reloads. This is going to make your navigation feel significantly faster and smoother. And you want to use this for internal routes to ensure you're leveraging getting the benefit from it, not to external routes. So when you enable Next-Link and you have prefetch enabled for your critical paths, that's a key point to remember really for your critical path. So going back to understanding kind of your user's journey through your application, what's those critical paths that they're going to be following to get to those areas that you want them to. So when you have prefetching enabled on a link that's using Next-Link, Next.js is going to automatically fetch that target page's JSON in the background. And you can set other parameters. It can be like when a user scrolls over that, there's different triggers you can have to kind of fine tune. By default, it's going to instantly load that when that link is available on the page. But you can get a little more complex in your code to add those triggers. But having that JSON preloaded in the background makes it to where when that user clicks on the link, that JSON's already cached in their browser, so the page loads almost instantaneously. And talking about prefetching a little more, so again, while prefetching will improve that performance, again, it's also going to consume some resources. So every time you're calling that prefetch trigger, it's invoking serverless functions or API requests. So for some of your lower priority, not as critical links and pages, you might want to consider disabling prefetch. So a little bit of a trade-off there, but personally, I haven't seen it causing that much of a problem from a usage perspective. And then lastly, again, like I was saying, if you need more control over those triggers, you can get more complex and implement some additional logic there. The next component is Next Font. So by default, many Sitecore headless starter kits and scaffoldings don't configure font optimization. You might be using a lot of Google fonts via a link tag in your HTML. And this could result in render blocking requests, layout instability, especially over users that have slow network connections. So by using Next Font, it ensures fonts are going to be loaded in line with the CSS and reduce the file size. This should avoid layout shifts caused by delayed front-end rendering. So say like the page loads, the font hasn't loaded, so you see the text in one font. Once that font loads and is applied, there might be a shift because that font takes up a different space. So again, instead of relying on Google Fonts or other CDNs, using Next Font, you can bundle your font with your application and have it live at the edge alongside your application to help, again, combat any slow loading network conditions that a user might be facing. They're not having to go out and pull that font from a third party. And when I was talking about the flash of unstyled text, this should help combat any of that as well. And this is so font usage may vary by layout route. So using global font declarations in your app.tsx file or scoped per page is needed, depending on your design system, will ensure consistency, allowing flexibility when required. You could use this with custom or third-party fonts as well. It's kind of natively works with Google fonts. But if you wanted to use any of those other fonts, you could download those and store them in the public folder of your application and push them out through your deployment as well. All right, so now let's talk about a really nice feature that Vercel came out with. I think it was earlier this year. But time goes quick, so it might be longer. And that's fluid compute. So fluid compute combines the scalability of serverless with the efficiency of a persistent infrastructure. So it's really kind of leaning back a little bit to server implementations by eliminating the cold start of these serverless functions and reducing reusing any idle compute time. Again, similar to how your traditional servers would act. So this would be especially beneficial for your sections using SSR or ISR, where consistent performance matters. You should see fewer cold starts and better response times during those traffic spikes. Um, so what this does, but if you don't have this enabled, what happens is every serverless function that gets called, it's single threaded. So it has a cold startup, it starts, runs its function, and then it spins down. So you're kind of losing, you're paying for that usage during that startup, and then also that idle time as it spins down. That's nothing's happening. So by enabling fluid compute, which can be done very easily, it's done on a project basis. So you go into your project settings under your functions tab. There'll be a toggle for fluid compute. If you don't see it, you can talk to your Vercel account rep, and they can help you get that enabled. You toggle it on, do a redeployment, and that's all you need to do. But by enabling it, it allows function invocations when they spin up to, you have that initial maybe cold start, but then once it's running, all the subsequent requests can kind of queue up and also be run by that same function instance. So you're getting, again, like multi-threaded and more of a classic server implementation, but still running at the edge. So after you enable it, you can go and look at the observability section on your Vercel project, and there's a functions tab, so you can go and see how the timing of your functions, what the startup type is. It'll separate them by cold, pre-warmed, and I think warm. So you can see how that enabling this has impacted your function execution before and after as well. So really easy, no code changes, just a toggle. And quick sidebar, if you're not seeing this in your Vercel interface, and reach out to your account rep. I don't have a specific slide for this, but Vercel changed their billing model again. I think earlier this year, maybe last year, to something called MIUs, Managed Infrastructure Units. Essentially, what that is they previously all the different aspects of Vercel were metered individually. So like your function request, your all usage in there was kind of tracked individually. And so if you were needed to increase usage in a certain area, you would have to go back to and adjust your contract for that area. Switching over to MIUs, it lumps everything into one big bucket. And so you can use all these different aspects of the platform kind of on an as needed basis. You're not so constrained to individual metrics. So enabling fluid compute, I've seen that kind of go hand in hand, not necessarily, but that's another good thing to talk about with your Vercel account rep, is getting over to that new model to open up your capabilities a little bit. Next, redirects. So storing redirects and resolving those in Vercel Edge config can increase the speed that those redirects execute at. So handling them at the edge is going to eliminate the need to run application or middleware code for known redirect paths, and allow Vercel to instantaneously resolve those at the edge. So this would be really good for vanity URLs, campaign links, or SEO-driven routes. And doing this keeps that redirect logic outside of Sitecore's request path. Think of this maybe like if you're doing a migration and you had a site that had, not uncommon, tens of thousands of redirects stored in Sitecore, and their authors were used to managing them, but having to go all the way back to Sitecore to make those requests, you're going to add a lot of latency. And you can, to go through a little bit of a process change, just having these redirects stored in Vercel's Edge config doesn't have to be so code heavy. So you can manage those through deployments. You can do them through update them with Vercel's API. So there's some options there to make it maybe not as prohibitive to update and manage those. There is a additional thing to consider with this. So traditionally, if you were to go and add a bunch of redirects to an edge config, the way those redirects will be processed when a request comes in, it's going to start searching down your list in order, so from top to bottom, analyzing the requests that came in against all of the redirects you have until a match was found. And once it is, it'll follow that redirect and continue on. If not, it's still going to have to process those. And again, it's not uncommon to see projects that have tens of thousands of redirects. So having the go through and analyze all of those potential matches for every request is just going to add a lot of overhead. So you can use something called a Bloom filter to cut that down. So this adds a small amount of overhead for every request for that Bloom filter to run. But what this Bloom filter does is it's going to look at a request and determine what is the statistical possibility that there is a request in my redirect, or sorry, a redirect in my list that's going to match this request. And if the probability, you can toggle this, but if the probability is like below 80%, it'll send the request right through. Otherwise, only if it feels necessary, then you will go and process the redirects in a traditional manner. So it gives you, for the small amount of overhead of running the Bloom filter, to look at analyze the probability that there might be a redirect, you're going to save a lot of compute time if there's not a possible match for that, and instantly send the request right through and not have to go and analyze it against all of those potential redirects. Lastly, this is just kind of a public service announcement for good coding practices. So maintain a clean code base. And this is a lot of projects coming from legacy implementations, doing a migration into XM Cloud, having to go through somewhat of a rebuild to implement that Next.js application. It's a really good time to go through and do those cleanup tasks. And we don't always get that time in projects, but finding that time and advocating for it will serve you well in the long run. So remove any unused personalization logic or stale feature flags. So again, if you're not using those, there's no need to keep them around. Kind of goes back to our first slide of reducing the payloads. Just trim it down as much as possible. Scope your middleware to only routes that you need. So Next.js middleware runs before every request hits your route handlers. So if it's too broadly applied, that's going to add overhead to every request. So define right route matchers precisely to ensure middleware only runs where it's needed. Drop that legacy multi-site logic. So this is a topic that I want to get into a little more in a little more detail later this year. But if you move, I like the approach of having different Vercel projects for my different sites, if they're all under kind of one brand. So if you're migrating that application over and it's got some outdated shared logic going on, again, those are some things that you could maybe remove to reduce the size of your application. Also audit shared components for any unused data fetching or props. So components can retain logic from previous use cases, like fetching data or receiving props that aren't used anymore. It's going to create extra noise in your code base and add more data transfer. So auditing those and slimming them down is going to, again, reduce your overhead. And then once you have your application running in Vercel, use the analytics features that they have. I mentioned observability. They have Observability Plus as well. They have I think it's called, I forget the name of the section, but it will give you those core web vitals for the application as well. So going in and really understanding that data of where you could even find more improvements to make in your code and implementation will serve you well. And run linting and bundle analysis to catch dead code and any extra bloat. So tools like ESLint, NextLint, Webpack, Bundle Analyzer can help you identify any extra unused code that you haven't found on your own, or it can also help with oversight dependencies, duplicate packages, and you can automate this and have it as part of your CI/CD process to get those benefits as you go. So a lean, well-maintained code base is going to be faster and quicker than a heavy, bloated one. If you don't do this, just remember that Mr. Clean will be watching. So to summarize the topics that we covered, trim payloads to reduce unnecessary data in layout service and GraphQL responses to minimize your hydration time and improve your load speeds. Make smart choices with your rendering implementation. So do that analysis of your application, where your users are going to go, and how can you best blend these different rendering strategies to get the most performance for each section and each page. Enable real-time updates. So look at doing ODR via that webhook that we talked about to get those refreshes on those publishing events instead of having to do full rebuilds or wait for a predetermined revalidation period. Look at using next image, link, font, fluid compute, some low or no code options to get in and make some improvements in different areas of your website. Optimize your redirects, get those on the edge. Look at those bloom filters if you have a substantial number of redirects, and clean your code base out. Any questions?
Might have a question. I guess it's not on this list, but so I'm very liberal. As far as logging goes, right? We can log, right? And I like to log a lot. I feel like there's no penalty, and I'm not paying for it, so I don't really care. But I'm curious if there's any concerns around like how much we put in the logs, or is this really affects performance in any way, shape, or form from based on your experience? I don't think it is, but it might, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen it cause any problems. It's not the same as like when you're running in the server capacity where writing a lot to your logs could add a lot of bloat to your disks and whatnot. Like I'm not seeing any negative impacts from logging. The only thing that might be a problem, not be a problem, but something to consider is if you wanted to retain those logs for a longer period of time. I think in Vercel, the default is 3 days. So if you're going to set up a log shipping and push those out, they do, that does incur usage for your subscription to move that data out. So if you have a lot there and you're moving them out, that could eat up some of your usage. But from a performance perspective, I haven't noticed any problems.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, because I was curious. I mean, I write everything I can to logs because it's easier to troubleshoot, and since I'm not in for it, right? I mean, it's not my server that
right
have to support. Yeah, that's a good point. Obviously, it's there might be a penalty, but I've not seen any information on it. That's cool. Yeah. And but thank you, amazing presentation. I mean, I definitely the image and these are the easy things, right? But there are other things that SSR versus SSG, like that decision is tough decision to make, especially outside of Sitecore. Like
yeah. It's nice. Like I know it seems, I don't know what everybody else's experience has been, but it's not, for at least for myself, it's not uncommon to see it be challenging to kind of get that extra time to do some of those deeper analysis, you usually get shorter timelines, tighter budgets, and it's all about building as quick as you can, but really taking that step back and thinking about what's this, what do we want this website to do? Where do we want people to go? You know, I'm getting into your analytics, like defining personas and like analyzing, like how is your website being used? Where do you want people to go? And how can we, kind of adjust how we build this to optimize the performance?
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Luke. Amazing presentation. Just wanted to ask, like, in terms of tools, how you measure and say debug performance on the site. What do you use, and which would you recommend for Vercel?
Yeah. So their built-in tools are pretty nice. I'm still learning how to use those the most efficiently. Like their built-in observability, really observability plus the basic observability doesn't give you very much information, but it does a pretty good job of like helping you identify, requests and functions that are performing pretty slow. Gives you some nice percentages as well. But they, I like to combine that with, I use Datadog a lot, and shipping out my logs and other information there as well to leverage its capabilities for data aggregation analysis to cut down on any overhead from myself of having to then go and sort through all of that data that I have.
Special thanks for the float compute.
Yeah, it's a good one. And it's nice that it's just a toggle switch.
Yeah.
I will, if I can get my mouse over, stop sharing.
All right then. If there are no more questions, I will probably take it from you here and step in with my own presentation, which will tell you about the automatic conversion from XP to XM Cloud. And that actually is a big one. The topic is about migrating XP to XM Cloud. And when I say XP, I actually mean almost any XP. This is something everyone was interested in for the past 3 years. Many companies are willing for the magic pill. And I was thinking initially there is some easy approach to it, but I learned that hard way until I start implementing this conversion tool. So today I'm going to share you all my roadblocks and all my findings I came across while I reached this conversion tool. I call it XM Cloud Factory, but I think it's like a working title. We may upgrade it to something different. Of course, I'm going to show you a demo at the end of the presentation, and I will talk it through what it does and how it does. For those who don't know me, my name is Martin Miles. I am XM Cloud enthusiast. I used to work together with Luke, the previous speaker, and my area of focus is basically everything about Sitecore. Here is my blog, and it's actually my previous blog as well here, along with my social handles. Right, so XM Cloud Factory, what is that? This is AI-powered migration framework, which is targeted specifically for migrating XP to XM Cloud. And it's done in that manner that it will work with almost any XP. Of course, the more you have customizations, the more difficult it will be and the more of manual labor it will bring. But the general aim is still the same. We want to take away 70, 80, 90% of boring labor just to leave you with something that is not easily resolvable, minimizing your effort. Today I'm going to talk about lift and shift approach. Of course, it's not the only one. You can go for redesign. You can do different other techniques how you are going to migrate, but lift and shift is the current scope. I also put this message, LinkedIn message by Vasily Fomichev, who is 11 times Sitecore MVP. I familiarized Vasily a couple of days ago with this demo, and he is praising it. Thank you, Vasily, for the kind word. I really appreciate your feedback here. But we go ahead. So why do we do lift and shift in first place? Many companies nowadays, especially with the current economy situation, they have very tight budgets. At the same time, they have deadlines with their current licenses, and they have to do something. They have to take a decision, let's say, by the end of current year. This approach, when you do lift and shift, it allows you to save 80% of time and effort because of these automations, and effectively it wins you time, which you can focus on the proper design and maybe rethinking your web presence and defining your roadmap. So the companies can start using XM Cloud straight away, straight today, learn this platform, already have the site migrated to XM Cloud at the very minimum effort, while thinking well ahead. One thing to mention is that based on my experience, in many cases, XM Cloud comes often cheaper in total cost of ownership. That comes as the combination of license cost and operational overhead. In many cases, it can be maintained by maybe a team of 2 or even less people. It varies on your company, but it can still be cheaper. Initially, when thinking which approach should I take, I thought, okay, why if I do everything by SQL? I was very much inspired by publishing service, and if I'm given a master database of XP site which I want to migrate, after a couple of considerations, I came across to 150-line long SQL script that returns me this record set as you see on the screen. That's basically the whole presentation, like its renderings, all the information that requires to recreate them, rendering parameters even, data source locations, template, like everything. And what is interesting, if doing that with PowerShell, it would take, I don't know how much it will take with PowerShell. This record set for the whole site comes out in maybe 1.5 seconds or less. In PowerShell, you would spend twice more for the round trip of the request to the backend, which includes authentication and everything else. That was my initial thought, because I could just simply restore database to the SQL server and do all the operations, extract all the presentation, extract all the information, and that would be super quick. But later I came across to the complexities. I will tell you about these complexities when we are going to talk about the roadblocks. Long story short, this approach is still possible, but it requires too much effort. Instead of going with SQL, I decided to choose PowerShell. So why PowerShell? First of all, built-in an operation system. It has no extra dependencies. You get it straight away. I'm going to use that for PowerShell remoting, which is a Sitecore PowerShell extension module built in an XM Cloud. And these two have, it's basically a single language. You have PowerShell here on your host machine. You have PowerShell there on the cloud instance. You just wrap one and into another and send it, and then retrieve the results from the backend. It's very easy to fix and run. I don't know how that for the rest of the people, but for me, it's like probably my best skill is using PowerShell. When using AI, it's so easy to generate PowerShell again because of its strict syntax. And since it's textual language, it's very easy to version control it. So I always have the version history. If something goes wrong, I can go back and see what I changed. It comes with some negatives, of course. The one negative, the biggest, I think, from using that is I heavily use it with PowerShell remoting, and the result set comes upon the execution. Let's imagine you have a script you want to execute remotely at your XM Cloud instance that may take some reasonable time, maybe a minute or 2 or 3. Once you execute it, you will see blank screen until all your results come down. So let's say you are processing items in bulk, and if upon the completion of each bulk item process, it will send, manage this migration, manage this migration, manage this. But you will only get the full result set when the whole bulk executes. It's not that much responsive, but I think it's kind of a compromise. You have to buy it. And sometimes you have to deal with some scripting creativity, as I call it. What I mean by this is, let's say I want to upload and install package to XM Cloud. It looks like an easy task. I can use upload command, but something not goes right with it. After long troubleshoot, I realized that is a problem with the PowerShell extension module, and I contacted the developers. They admitted this bug. They said we will fix it with the further versions, but for now you don't have any fix. I still want to install package. I still want to do it programmatically. How do you achieve that? Not so easy. I had to base 64 the package into a textual format, send all that to the backend, then generate it as a media item there on the server, save it locally, and then execute it. So it still works, but that's what I say. You have to be creative in some cases. Hopefully developers will fix that. Of course, nothing goes without AI these days. For XM Cloud Factory, I used approach of two, like it's like a branch of two AI approaches. So I have basic scenario and I have advanced scenario. Basic scenario, no customer content or data touches AI. That's like universally. So if the customer has the task to me, none of the stuff goes to AI. I only keep it within a perimeter of my machine. I only use AI for generating the automations for migration, namely the PowerShell script and everything. So it's not AI that does migration. AI produces me the tools to do the migration. Nothing goes to AI. So no customer code goes to AI by default with the basic scenario at all. This is very important for some regulated industries. We do respect that. We may want to go slightly beyond that. We may ask permission the clients to use AI. If they give us yes and provide a code base, then we can do much better. What we can do better is we can make the component conversion much better, very accurate. We're using a combination of MCP server, and we have a train model that knows how the components should be derived for Next.js, and basically matching, it's trained for matching old CS/HTML components, mapping them to Next.js components, which is TypeScript-based components. Another input other than CS/HTML is obviously the source code, because we get permission to use it. From XM Cloud, we use an entire layout for the page as it renders. That will produce very accurate TSX output, and that alone saves so much time. Of course, there is still an option for using AI beyond that. For example, you cannot just generate the components, you can improve the content, make better reliability, process media, and so on. I faced numerous roadblocks and challenges which I had to resolve. First and the most, input sides. Where do I get the one? In order to convert something, I need to get this something. I don't keep old customers' projects, because upon the completion of every project, you sign off cease of destruction document, which basically enforces you to delete this project and everything related to it. So nothing left on my side. There were numerous public projects like, I don't know, which any Helix-based projects. But again, if you download their code, which is abandoned for maybe 3-4 years, maybe 5 years, and try to install that, you will fail. I guarantee that. I tried. That is because NuGet repository is gone, some scripting gone, the whole Sitecore download portal has moved in the past year. Like, lots of things have changed, which is not addressed in this abandoned code. You don't get that. My solution to that was, I thanked myself for keeping and fixing lots of things. Over the past decade, I played lots with Sitecore, and for each of these type of things, I create a virtual machine and kind of freeze everything. I somehow found a virtual machine with an old good Habitat website, which works like a charm for me in this virtual machine. So I grabbed this virtual machine, mounted it to my host machine in a Hyper-V, made the routing so this website is accessible from my host machine. That already made me work. The other challenge is how to, so you get the master database from XP. What do you do with that? How do you connect? And how do you connect to XM Cloud? It took me quite a while to figure out what you can do with it. Eventually, I came across the solution to plug it as a secondary publishing source, which we called an XP, right directly into SQL Server, which runs in your local SQL Server container. Again, that approach is not documented, so I had to spend some time and identify the magic which Sitecore applied to naming conventions beyond the connection strings. So there are lots of transformation. Again, it was reverse engineering days for me, but I eventually came across how I can do that. And there is a big blog by myself explaining how to do that. I will show you that on demo, how it all works. That problem was eventually solved as well. We're using PowerShell remoting, which obviously works with XM Cloud, but everything is disabled and you have to find out how to enable it. More to say, you need to find out how to set up permissions and adequate permissions, how to tune it up. So it took me another decent amount of time to make it happen, to document and to get the XM Cloud instance that allows me to send and execute remote code. The next thing, I mostly used Anthropic and OpenAI AIs, especially OpenAI brought me challenges most of the time. I'm using paid version, but I hit limits so many times. So it simply tells me, okay, man, you cannot do any work until tomorrow 9 a.m. The other thing was the very little context OpenAI models have. I call it golden fish memory effect, which honestly could be better. And with the release of ChatGPT 4.1, they seem to get it improved, but still it's not that good as with other models. Okay, the other thing is if I do content migration, I must migrate everything. So if I'm migrating some item, it should go with all the languages, all the versions, all their related things like security, everything must get migrated. And what is the most important is that I must preserve IDs for everything. Exactly the same IDs as they are on XP database must be copied to the XM Cloud database. What do we first start with is sanity checks. It's nice to expect that Habitat website that comes from Sitecore demo team would carry on the best quality possible. In reality, it's not. There are some bugs that, in my opinion, developers brought them manually as last-minute fix. I don't know what was in the background, but I saw different things like duplicate UIDs. What is UID? I will talk about that later in the presentation screen. Every instance of your renderings on a page presentation has its unique ID. Let's say you have a page that has a couple similar renderings. Let's say it has a couple rich text. Rendering ID would be the same for them. But how to distinguish one from another? That is done by UID. What I noticed that website has duplicate UIDs for specific renderings that broke the presentation conversion. I had to introduce the sanity check, which identifies these issues and fixes them. In XP, you can have multiple pages that have the same name at the same level because there's no restriction. You have same name items. And on XM Cloud, that is restricted. This is a no-no. Again, we must do a sanity check to see if there are such cases. We must address them right on the XP database before we even do the migration. The other check I want to do is to make sure there is no large items in the media library. We have a limit of 50 megabytes for any media blob that will get published to Experience Edge. This alone will not stop you from migration, but it will bring you hard times when you start finding why this media item, maybe it could be a long PDF port, is not showing on your client side. And that was not because it didn't get published to Experience Edge due to its size. Of course, sometimes you have circular broken references. And when it comes to presentation, especially placeholders, hierarchy, you can see it broken in some ways. All that must be addressed before even you start doing the migration. The good news is that I have a sanity checking script that does the most of these checks for me. I know when I do migration, I start clean. Okay, what do we do migrate? First of all, there are specific things which we migrate right as is. So we have templates. All the templates we are going to use, we simply migrate as is with the same IDs, with the same structure. They may have different destination location. It's obvious because they will be likely to locate under the tenant/site name because that is the valid location for XM Cloud. But anything underneath will be migrated exactly that same. This also comes true for media library items and for placeholder settings. Different location at the destination, but they will be effectively that same as they are on XP. The other thing is we need to do specific conversions to the items we migrate, and that comes to dictionary entries. Why so? It's because on XM Cloud, dictionary entry has a template with two multi-line fields, but on XP, the template is very much custom. Most of us have it from Habitat, but nothing stopped you from doing a custom template. So there's no guarantee that you will get it in any specific way, but what is definitely for sure is that it will mismatch XM Cloud template 100% of cases, because at least of not having the same ID. So what we need to do, we need to convert these dictionary entries on a fly while we're copying from one format to another. When it comes to the actual pages, the content in these pages remains the same. So we have page level fields, it's get copied. We get lots of internals for the page, it's get copied as is. The one thing that also gets copied with the pages is presentation. Same presentation, I mean, what sits in two fields for the shared layout and for the final layout. This presentation gets copied, it contains the structure for the components as they build the page. However, they are in an old XP format. It's not compatible to XM Cloud. We must do the conversion. There will be a whole block of discussion. I'm going to devote to that. There are some special items to copy. Why I say special, we want to copy old site homepage. But again, we cannot just copy and overwrite XM Cloud homepage simply because XM Cloud homepage for the site is very much different. It's absolutely different. We must retain XM Cloud homepage and copy this home just as a child of it. It will be home/home. Again, you use it temporarily just to address the presentation, and once you fix the presentation and convert it, you can simply migrate these two fields for shared layout, final layout into the item that was originally provided by XM Cloud. The other thing that is special is a site definition item. Same story. With XM Cloud, we have site root item, which has lots of special fields. It's in XM Cloud defined format, so you cannot override that. We still need this site definition item because in my case, what I found, it was used for many other items as a data source because it was referenced, it contained media, it contained some site settings, and I would say quite lots of these site settings. So what I do, again, I copy it to the XM Cloud, just this item exclusively with no children, as a child of the XM Cloud site definition item. I will be later able to use this item as a data source and nothing else I use it for. Now, once we done content migration, we need to talk about how to convert presentation. Here on the screen, I'm showing you how the presentation looks like in XP. Here's what we see. We have D tag, which is basically responsible for device ID, because along for the page we have numerous presentations for numerous devices. This is very rudimental thing with XP, and it even comes to XM Cloud, but it's still there, so their format remains the same. As a child of this item, we have lots of R tags with UID. This is the unique identifier, which I told you earlier about. It must be always unique, and my sanity check identifies if it's not. Then there are special comments how we locate this rendering. If there is data source, it's referenced as DS. ID is just your rendering definition item ID. The most important thing is here PH. PH is placeholder. That explains to the renderer how we would put this item into the hierarchy. Is it nested item? Is it top level placeholder? Does it sit in the dynamic placeholder fields? So if you look at this one, it has /page layout, then it has /, which means it will be a child component that has section placeholder. Then you have GUID, which means it was dynamic placeholder, there's 0. Then you have another /, which means there will be another nested rendering that has call huge component, and again it's a dynamic placeholder with that ID. Quite long, clumsy, and XM Cloud does not use that format. It uses its own format. When I say we are going to convert presentation, we are going to convert this thing. Originally, I thought it would be as easy as just come and use regular expression to replace these placeholders from one logic to another logic, because placeholders in XM Cloud, they follow their own rules. However, I faced plenty of challenges doing that. First of all, dynamic placeholders in XM Cloud, they use dynamic placeholder ID that is done on their parent component. I will show you in a minute how it looks like. This dynamic placeholder ID was not a part of XP. It was allocated dynamically, and it was assigned for the component itself, while in XM Cloud, it's for parent. Long story short, for XM Cloud, they totally redo the way they build presentation, because they have to create the layout, like the rendered page layout, JSON, that has everything, all the placeholders with all the renderings in their places. That was something they converted. My job is to build a bridge between old and new presentation. Okay, when it comes to converting renderings, here right-hand side, you see how the presentation looks on the XM Cloud side of things. So take a look at the site menu, language menu, login menu. What you see is, again, the nested hierarchy, but there are no GUIDs. Instead, you have more nicely looking digits, -0, -13 or -0, -16. What is it? I will explain. At the very top level, which is layout level, there will be this navbar placeholder. Whichever component we put into that placeholder will have another placeholder, which is called navbar right. The suffix part, which is -0, -13, is what is XM Cloud's dynamic placeholder identification. And 13 here is dynamic placeholder ID of the parent rendering, the one that sits in navbar. And above, you see there is main navigation that is sitting in navbar placeholder. That main navigation has dynamic placeholder ID 13. That's why it's here. If you go even deeper below, there is another nested navbar activity placeholder with the different identifier -0, -16, where 16 would be a dynamic placeholder ID of whichever component sits in navbar right -0, -13, and that is main navigation activity. Oh, sorry, that's primary menu, but they have the same placeholder. It's very much different to what it was with XP. Apart from that, first of all, I need to bring renderings from XP to XM Cloud. We copy templates, we copy pages, but there are no renderings. No. And the reason to it is that we cannot just copy renderings, because on XP side, they are stored as a set of either controller renderings or view renderings, depending on how they build presentation. On XM Cloud side of things, we only use one rendering, which is JSON rendering. It has different fields, it has different logic behind it, so we cannot just bluntly copy these renderings. We must create them and convert it on a flight. The other thing is that we have a component name field, which is a very important field on the JSON renderings. This one has the name of TypeScript component, React Next.js component, that is responsible for rendering this particular component. Again, this sits in specific naming conventions. As a good example, you may historically have an XP renderings that start with digits or that have spaces, that have special characters, not all of them, but some of them, that allowed as the item name in XP. When you create component name, you must convert all these names into Next.js friendly format so that it respects naming convention. You will be able to create such a component and it will work. The next thing is rendering parameters. So along with the presentation, when we copied page items themselves, they also have rendering parameters as a part of their presentation. And that carries often useful parameters, in some cases that are scripts or other configuration, how they should do the presentation, how specifically they should render it. In most cases, this will be helpful to you even on XM Cloud, but regardless of its helpful or not, you must copy it in first place so that you decide it later. How do you deal with that? You have to create a new rendering parameters template that will get used along with this rendering you are about to copy. And for that rendering parameter template, you will inherit from the legacy templates. All of the legacy templates, as you used to have them, will be brought into that new template. This will allow you to have all legacy parameters template for them to bring all these fields and for page to keep all these parameters. So nothing gets lost and it becomes in the XM Cloud format. The other thing is very challenging because it comes from the way of how placeholders are set in the renderings. With XP, there was no tight coupling between placeholders and renderings. You simply give a placeholder a name. Whichever placeholder on a page has this name mapped, it will accept this component. Here, it's done a little bit differently. So if you have a rendering which has a markup that has placeholders, you must go into rendering definition items, name all these placeholders. Because if you don't do that, your nested children will not show up in the layout. You must show all the placeholders for specific rendering. That was another lesson I learned hard way, but luckily my conversion respects all that and accounts all that and does that all automatically. Come into JSON renderings. The way rendering access data could be different. So if it's a rendering that relies on data source item, you can basically get the fields dropped through the model without anything else. So you don't need to do any resolver, you don't need to write any query, you don't need to do anything. But let's imagine you have a breadcrumb component. In this case, you need somehow to get the items that are sitting above this particular page in hierarchy. Because if it's like homepage, then you have products, then you have specific product page, you need to breadcrumb listing all these parents. Again, for the most similar cases, there are, I think, 6 or 5 data resolvers that account that. But there are some exotic ways like breadcrumb, which does not have resolver. And the only resort to make this work is to write a GraphQL query. How do you write GraphQL query? First of all, you go and see the page rendered layout. You open up Playground IDE, load your page layout JSON, the huge one, and navigate through placeholders, see and find your component. From there, you will start digging what kind of data does it want to do and how to achieve that. You have search as a part of your GraphQL request, but it again is some limited. For example, if we are talking about breadcrumb, you would likely to use Anjustice because that is an X that takes you above the hierarchy. The other example I had to resolve was pages that grouped in a bucket. This website has news, and there were lots of news under the bucket, which were even hidden 5 levels down the data source item. So first of all, it was data source, and the actual pages in the bucket were 5 levels down, nested to that data source. Again, you have to be very creative to find the best way how you can get and retrieve these items you need. In my case, I used search, but it should not be the only one way. There are different ways sometimes to retrieve what you need. So you need to think what is the complexity of this query and what would serve best and fast. The other thing relates to circular broken references. Again, this is something to must get resolved before you do convert your renderings. Same for placeholder keys and the broken placeholder hierarchy. If you face the one, you won't be able to recreate the components hierarchy. If you cannot address this before migration, before doing all this procedure at the XP side of things, you may lose this branch from the place where it's broken. The last but not least is probably the biggest thing I want to bring to the attention is that I have to use runtime resolution. What is runtime and why runtime? Once again, if you go and see how the presentation has been done at XP side of things, you will find that it's mapped by placeholder key. You will not know, and there's no any way to find the place for specific component in the hierarchy and how it all works together. So what I'm doing is that I am opening this rendered page in the runtime, and I get this information from a rendered page. That scripts, they learn this page, they learn the structure, they identify all the components, they identify how they are nested one into another, do some additional logic, but at the end of the day, this presents me a JSON with all the structure for this page hierarchy, including components, including placeholders, including renderings ID. It also helps me to find how it should be converted to XM Cloud by suggesting XM Cloud user-friendly name, which is friendly with XM Cloud, and some other things. But my first thing, before I even convert in the rendering, is to go and get these renderings for this site. Once I have this JSON, and again, I have a JSON for a page on a page level, I will be able to convert that renderings in the presentation. I know it sounds a little bit difficult, that's how it works. The other difficulty is how to convert components. So there is a difference between how ASP.NET views were functioning and how they work in Next.js. One of the things is that, let's, for example, take a controller. So when you have controller view, you have a controller behind of that. In the controller, you have likely some services that do some business logic, and they can bring a model. And they can build this model in many different ways. It's not just specifically a data source. It could have some specific additional fields. Also with the ASP.NET, you would have some helpers that are part of the markup, which also must be resolved with the backend. Lots of similar things. So with Next.js, we don't have that. We typically, Next.js component receive props. I show it on the right-hand side. So there is a logger component which receives typed props, which is logger props defined above, basically params and fields, where fields is, it's actually a single field, which is logo. It's a media field, image field. That is how data source comes to that component. Again, it's resolved on a page level for the Next.js, and then drop down to the nested components, unless you do some specific queries. It's not mapping one-to-one, it's very difficult. This very much depends on how I want to process these views. If it goes just with automatic conversion, the very simple way would be just to identify the boundaries of rendered HTML on a rendered page, cut this out, and then wrap it with Next.js structure. So in this case, if you look at this component, it has h4 and anchor tag. The script was smart enough to find its boundaries, wrap it with this TypeScript file, and generate props and other things as per requirement. When you want something bigger than that, and when you want to introduce dynamics, then it's only possible with the advanced approach when AI is used. So again, AI is trained to do that, and it has the full source code, it has layout, so it's capable to generate your renderings much more accurate, rather than just wrap the dummy static HTML with the TSX. So when it comes to model, as I said, we have a model coming into an MVC. That's what M stands for. If it's a view rendering, it kind of maps one-to-one to what we have with TypeScript here. If it's controller rendering, the model can be literally everything. Again, in most cases, by default, what you have as the type here is basically a description for a model, which this component takes. So it's not one-to-one mapping, of course, but it's very close to it. It has the fields defined. These could be generated. And this actually is how I am generating this code, converting models into this TypeScript. The next thing is, how do we do data retrieval for these components? This is more difficult, but typically we would have 4 or 6 data usage scenarios. As I said before, we can use GraphQL for anything that is not covered by these scenarios. Most of the scenarios use content resolvers, which you can select one of that content resolver on the rendering level, so that it knows how to obtain the data. So content resolver basically does what a very specific tailored GraphQL query will do for that component, but you don't have to provide GraphQL query in this case. So most of the cases could be done with this resolver. I would suggest to use GraphQL because it's a unified approach that covers most of the cases. GraphQL is much easier to generate with AI. As soon as you have the model that is trained and understands how the data is resolved, and especially if it's advanced scenario and it can use the backend code to look up how exactly the data and what kind of data is retrieved behind in the controller, it can suggest using this or that data usage scenario, whether it will be data source or like data source with children, or maybe it uses context item field, like page field. It will be smart enough to identify that. Once it identifies, it has a template for each of these scenarios. It only needs to adjust the markup into that template, rename the fields, basically save the component. Maybe it sounds like a magic at this stage, but once you start digging into that, it's not a magic, it's like a solid piece of logic behind. Another thing that you have to deal with is the front end. On the demo I'm going to show, there will be not everything from the front end, and I would say even nothing from the front end resolve, other than I just dropped scripts and styles into the public folder. And that again it depends upon your approach. If you follow the basic approach, what you can get minified, compiled JavaScripts, CSS files from the destination. Just take this file, put it into the /public directory on your Next.js application, reference it adequately, and here you go. It's expected to pick up all the styles, because when you do the conversion of the presentation, you keep the structure of HTML that same, and most of the classes will stay. I will be talking about that in more details just below. Most of styles may work with that, but again, there is no guarantee it will work, and it will likely not show you style perfect website as it was on the origin. Then if you go with advanced approach, when you feed the source code to AI, then AI can identify the classes for you from the code. So it sees the logic how the runtime how the classes are being calculated. It may reproduce this logic to suggest this or that classes, but even with that approach, 100% class mapping is not guaranteed. So the other thing, which is kind of a problem here, is that most of legacy XP websites that are done with MVC, they were built using this or that Helix starter kit. Some people used Habitat, this website, right as their starter kit without extra caring, because all the front end was predefined for them. Even I myself sometimes use that approach, because when I need a very quick resolution for POC or something I want to drop to customer, I better take the ready-to-use website, because I know how the front end compilation works there. I just do that, and here we go. Long story short, because they used Helix or Habitat, they had Bootstrap grid in most cases. And by those time, Bootstrap has a hard reference to jQuery. And jQuery on its own is not very much friendly working with React and Next.js. In my case, I'm not a front-end developer, so I have to ask a front-end developer to just look at the front end and identify the problems and fix it on my behalf, which I haven't done yet. But again, this is not the largest task compared to everything we automate by so far. We come to styles again. How do we deal with styles? So styles could be coming in three groups. Static styles is that just are coming with markup. They always have the same name. They never vary, and they will be automatically picked regardless of which approach you choose, basic or advanced, simply because if you put these compiled scripts and styles into public folder, if your, let's say, HTML structure mostly maps, your styles will mostly work. The other thing is that you may have dynamic classes. Those are getting resolved in runtime by C#. This is only possible with the advanced AI-powered conversion. Yes, in that case, you will likely to get this or that style resolved. But again, you will need to go and check the logic behind the style, the resolution, and apply it correspondingly on your Next.js application. And there is another one, style that can get parameterized. Saying that, I mean something coming from rendering parameters. Since we are migrating the pages that already have layout with these rendering parameters, and because when we create renderings, we inherited legacy rendering parameters and applied the new rendering parameters template to that each specific rendering, these parameters will be dropping into your component within the params. So it's only a matter for you to pick it and wire up. Okay, we also have fonts and icons. That again very much depends on the original website. In the basic most case, you may just see what is rendered on the site, on XP site, copy it and drop it in the same folder relative to the site root. Very likely you will see fonts like Google fonts that are loaded from the server. In that case, it comes even easier, so you don't need to do anything. They will be like a fully qualified path. Right, so what else do we need to consider? We may have redirects. XM Cloud uses redirects items and maps. It's not the straightforward solution. I would say out of the box, I would recommend to follow the advice by Luke from the previous presentation. Maybe you want to keep your redirects at the Next.js application level. Nothing stops you from converting redirects into XM Cloud redirect items and maps, but as I said, it's not the most effective thing. Every time you have changes in your URL structure, when the page changes its relative location in the sitemap, then you have to create a redirect to cover this case. Also, I wrote a very helpful blog post where I consider all the nuances of doing redirects for XM Cloud, all the possible scenarios, how you can achieve them, at least 3-4 scenarios. I very recommend you to go and look through that. And there is also a link to official documentation for XM Cloud redirects. Models customizations, with best honesty, this is something you will likely to drop off with this lift and shift migration. You will identify what is the functionality behind them and address this later after you finish the initial migration. More to say, many modules are not even longer supported with XM Cloud. Migrate only referenced items. This is the good advice, but when you do lift and shift, it's not something which is a hard requirement. It's nice to have. Security gets copied along with the pages because it is a part of the page items. It won't be much used at the XM Cloud side of things. You may want to exclude security if you don't need it. It's up to you, but you must be aware that it's copied. Sitecore forms, they have gone. There is no Sitecore forms with XM Cloud. They provide their own composable XM Cloud forms builder instead. This is something you may potentially want to consider. And of course, once you finish, you want to validate your content migration. There are different, at least 3 approaches you should use, all 3 of them. Manual testing is still with us. It haven't gone anywhere. At least you need to click your pages and see how the content fit layouts so that it looks same as it was before. Nothing gets broken, at least at the very high level. The automated sitemap comparison, that's for automated testing. You will write scripts and make sure nothing gets broken, but my best advice would be to use a deep compare scenario powered with AI. The best candidate for XM Cloud would be using a Cypress testing. This is a very good framework that works in browser because it's written with Node.js. That's why it nicely handles asynchronous JavaScript. It's generally very reliable, and the execution code for Cypress is almost a human readable code, which means it follows the rules at the same time, and it's very easy to be AI written. So with AI, you can say, I want you to write me to navigate the original page and see all the components on this page, write the script to make sure all these components present with specific classes. So you can be very specifically creative while writing the script, but believe me or not, I tried that. In a minute, you will get huge Cypress script that will run your page and bring you multiple green ticks saying, okay, your page complies to that. Now, if you're doing lift and shift migration, your rendered code is expected to be the same or almost the same as it was before. In ideal case, it should be HTML perfect, but we know that it's not achievable or maybe rarely achievable. By running this deep compare automation script, you will see what exactly gets broken, like what is missing, what is not at the right level, so that you should decide what to do with that. Maybe you can leave it as is, maybe you can try to rewrite it, maybe it's just something broken and you missed a component halfway down and that's why it's missing. So this AI-powered script will definitely let you find this out. The beauty is that it's applicable for all the pages, for all the site. Right, so demo time, eventually demo time. I'm going to show you the whole process of this conversion, which is about 12 minutes or something. I will be talking through all the steps, what's happening beyond the cursor. Hopefully you'll get it. If you miss something, please raise the questions on the Q&A part of this session. This is Habitat website. I run it from virtual machine. I just dropped the host name you see in the browser. It runs from virtual machine. This is the rendered page with all the components, how it looks like, with the original styles and with everything. I also have XM Cloud instance here, but look here, I have additional 2 databases. This is something I told. This old is the legacy master database from XP. So if I go to content editor, I open the node, you see habitat site definition, the home item, all the pages, like everything that was used in this legacy website. And again, I took the master database, I restored here. So here in SQL Server, you see there are 4 databases, like core, master, and old core with old master. I make them selectable here from the content editor interface. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is to copy the content. Again, as it comes from presentation, I'm copying the templates first, then I'm copying the content, then, yeah, same content, I mean the pages. I also copy the placeholder definition items, and nothing goes without media. In my case, it's images, but there are also a couple of videos. And if you were patient on the homepage, you saw this video, which we are going to migrate as well. So here at XM Cloud side of things, I have just, I had empty site, but now you see the content was migrated. But yeah, okay, media is also there. And there are 2 videos as well. Right, let's go ahead. No dictionary, so we need to copy dictionary. Let's go and do that. So copy and converting dictionary items. I have to convert them because of the different templates. And I also provide the target path where I want it to drop. Right, all of them copied and get converted. Let's take a look at the result. Yes, there are top level sections, there are bottom level sections. This is a dictionary item with the key and phrase. So yes, they are all here. Good, good. The habitat, this is the legacy site definition item. Yes, we need it for data source. Now we go take a look. There is no renderings here. Neither at feature site or project. You see there are empty folders. So we're going now to migrate and convert renderings right into these folders. So here's what I do. I run this conversion script. I also need to provide the parameters. As you remember, one of the parameters will be the URL of the old website with old database, sorry, database old, and the other is site root, is the site root of the old site on this old database. So it went through all the pages on all the site and identified all the renderings that are used on all the pages. Then it executed runtime, converted them, and created all of them here. So the one important bit which I was talking is, let's take a look at this container rendering. So this rendering is 2 columns 3.9. It has 2 placeholders. So they must be accounted here in the layout service placeholder. If these placeholders are not here, they will not render anything underneath. This is a very important difference with the XM Cloud. And luckily, the script converted it all. So all the renderings are now ready. And we are good to go ahead. Okay, what do we do next? Next, we will now create the Next.js components for this rendering, because we only created rendering definition items, but now we need to create the components. And you see I'm providing URL base because we are going to run, we're going to take them in runtime. So it now goes through all the pages on a legacy website, looks and identifies which are the components, and calculates them, calculates the folders, and it places them into the folders, mimicking the same folder structure as it was done there before in the MVC side. So you see views folder, then it has subfolders, which are Helix modules. And it's wise enough, it only picks the renderings which do not exist yet. So you see now it processes pages and there's nothing, like no more renderings, because all the renderings exist. If it comes across new one that didn't exist, I mean the TSX, for example, like here, it will go and create. So now it saw this article aside both never existed, so it went and created it. And again, it's very smart enough to reproduce the path. It's also smart enough to slice it very accurately, exactly the same as it was done in XP. But the biggest thing of that is it only calculates that all from the runtime. And again, without runtime, it's not possible because it's not possible to retrieve the hierarchy of XP components without runtime. On XM Cloud, you can retrieve layout, rendered layout, JSON at any time, but not on XP. So let's see what is generated. I have this habitat application, sources, components. So that's view folder. And probably the best would be to take a look at the structural one that has, remember this one I showed you that has two nested placeholders. So these are GSS placeholders. It knows the name and it imports the placeholders. So basically it cuts the structure. Even if you don't use AI approach, it will use the static snippets, but it still will identify the structure. So it uses statics, but if there are nested components, it will cut the static for the nested component, replace it with placeholder, and move that static into the nested placeholders TypeScript file. So now the most important bit. We are doing the page layout conversion, namely the presentation. So what we do, we set the layout. First of all, we set the layout item for the page. And the other thing is that we rebind the renderings from legacy XP placeholder format into the new XM Cloud dynamic placeholder format. So here's it. Let's see. First of all, you see habitat layout here, which means we change the layout. Then all these placeholders you see there in the very right format, so they follow up XM Cloud dynamic placeholder format. So if I run this page now, it will be actually running and executing. But before going that far, I want to set data source fields because, again, remember we copied this home definition item from XP, which been used by some components as a data source. So what I'm doing here is I am changing the data source to that item for some page templates, namely for 3 components per 2 templates, 6 cases. So, okay. Here are all the renderings I have. So the one thing I want to do is I also want to set the GraphQL query. So you see it's empty here. And I'm using, this is the query for the latest news. Remember the one I said with the search. So it searched by the page template from the bucket. And here is it. It now appears after I set the field. Again, I'm not doing anything manually. I'm running PowerShell scripts that use remoting to set the values. Nothing I set manually. Now, let's do this one. That's the main carousel on the home page. Again, we get it. 2 more. The next would be for the page teaser. It's a very basic one. Here is it. And breadcrumb, another one I was talking about. This one that use ancestors X because it must go up. So let's refresh the item, and yes, this query is here. So now these components are capable of getting these data sources. Let's run it first of all in Experience Editor. So yes, you see styles are not showing up, all of them properly, but what is much more important here, on this page we see all the components that are part of presentation. They nicely and structurally set up here. Again, because of styles and because of no child items yet, you don't see everything, but many of the components are still invisible. This is how it looks when you open the site. Some of the styles been picked up, much better than an Experience Editor, but still slightly far from the ideal case. So homepage was done nice. Now I want to execute exactly the same, but for all the pages on a site. So now if you see, I'm iterating across all the pages, and saying page, I mean the item that has presentation, but not a standard value item of a template. And I'm going through all these items and apply the script to each of these pages. So everything is done on the page level here. Again, I am resolving lots of things from the runtime. That's why I have to provide this URL parameter, as you see. Right. Let's take a breath and wait till it finishes. Luckily, Habitat website does not have many pages. And you see this warning in some cases. It's not possible to obtain layout, especially if there is a redirect. So it nicely notifies me about that if it cannot do something. So, okay, yeah, other pages, they all have this presentation converted, everything as I expect. Let's take a look at one more page. Presentation details. Yeah, all the components here. Let's see placeholders. They are also nicely converted here. No ugly GUIDs and right path. Let's now see how it works in Pages. Pages is new editing interface. It basically mimics Experience Editor here. In the page metadata mode, it will work on its own, directly rendering your rendered website. Again, if you go with not GSS, but with Content SDK, which luckily passed version 1, you will only have metadata mode, so it will be much easier for you and the site will be lightweight. So now let's again open this homepage on a rendered site. Saying rendered site, I mean the one that opens from the host name. So here are my teasers, page teasers. Look at how they show up on the rendered site, and this is very, very similar to how it was done before on the original site. You just compare one by one. Again, that's because all the sites for this component have been picked up. If spending some time for adjusting the websites here, then obviously this migration will work universally and you will see almost that same look and feel website. I am coming back to you with the questions. Any questions so far?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was wondering with content migration, like the script you shown, I think Sitecore does have some migration tools as well. I was just wondering what Sitecore is missing in terms of capabilities, or can we use Sitecore for this?
Mm-hmm. Okay, the short answer, Sitecore is missing everything. I know it sounds funny, but there was a content migration tool that the one you recall is probably that is standalone web application, WPF application that has the similar look and feel as it was Sitecore SIA tool, or whichever it was called. So are you talking about this one, Jack?
I'm not entirely sure, but I've seen one presentation on one of the, I think it was Sucon, and
Sucon, yes.
maybe it was, yeah.
Sucon North America 2023. I actually was a room captain on that presentation. That was Ivan, who works for Sitecore, and he presented this tool. So what's wrong with this tool? First of all, it only copies the content. It only copies the security, nothing else. It only works for a limited set of Sitecore versions, like 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, and nothing beyond this. One I was demonstrating is Sitecore 9.2. This is very old Sitecore. And even if I was about to use that tool, I have zero chances simply because it's not supported. Again, if you recall to my presentation I gave 3 years ago about Sitecore upgrades, the biggest gap between the versions from the upgrade point of view happened between 9.2 and 9.3. So there was lots of housekeeping done in between these two versions. A lot has been changed in architecture. Many dependencies dropped off, so they're very much different. From 9.3 to, let's say, 10.4, less changes done than in between 9.2 and 9.3. So it does not support all the versions. And again, it does not convert your presentation, it only copies the content. So copying the content in that aspect, you can just run one script by PowerShell remoting and you get it. But if you recall to my blog post, I will show you even better way to copy the content. Actually, you can use built-in tools in the Sitecore XM Cloud to visually copy content, but no one talks about it. So as soon as you get these 4 databases in the right dropdown, as I showed, then you can go to control panel, select move items between databases, and then with that tool you can just copy from old master to your XM Cloud master. You define what item to copy, you define what is destination, whether you want to copy children or not. It's pretty fast. In addition, it copies all the versions and all the languages, like all the dependencies. Basically everything I'm doing with this PowerShell script, but with visual graphical user interface. And that alone is already more effective than the tool you mentioned about. The only challenge is you have to restore your legacy master database and plug it into a container for your XM Cloud local instance. And yes, of course, you will have to do the deployment of your content because it sits locally at the time of completion. You will push it to the cloud. Does that answer your question, Jack?
Yes, thank you.
Who else has a question? Boris, you have a question, I think.
Yeah, I have a statement and 2 statements and 1 question. So first statement, kids don't try this at home. I mean, I understood, I would say 80% of this. This is complex stuff, but it's really cool. I mean, really, really cool. And I think also what I understood is that the way you choose to do migration is not by like how others do it, for example, where they kind of use AI to look at your page, right? And they try to recreate. So in your case, you're not doing that. You're actually doing real migration. You're taking all the places.
It's real migration.
So so this is real migration. So it's not like this kind of let's try to build similar type of thing, right? Which is good for small sites, but as you start looking at more complex things, it's not gonna work because these components that might look like in a specific way under the hood might have whole level of complexity and their tools would not see it. So when you've been thinking about, and I know you consider different ways how migrations can work. When you thought of that, what was the main reason for you to go with this? This is more complicated way, obviously, right? There's definitely more work to go this way compared to just, hey, let me take a screenshot of the page and let's create components using AI, right? So you definitely thought of that. And what was the reasons, like why you choose this way over the other one?
So the short answer is that what I just showed you is universal way. It works with any XP and it works with any size of websites. Again, let's imagine a huge enterprise website with plenty of components, plenty of pages, plenty of everything. With my approach I showed, it will, of course, not be 10 minutes, but okay, let's say an hour, right? But it eventually will go and complete and do automate lots of migration work for you. When you go with the approach like V0, when you feed the website as an image to the model, it is smart enough to cut it into the components. It is smart enough to do the rest of the things, but it will do presentation, but it will not care of any logic behind of that. In my case, I also mostly do the presentation, but it's supposed to be HTML perfect, component perfect, and Sitecore structure perfect. So as you had components on XP site renderings, you have them converted to JSON renderings on XM Cloud. Again, the component code, the boundaries, they remain exactly the same. Like everything stays exactly the same, other than it automatically switches the runtime. So other than front-end work that you have to do with your front-end developer for adjusting the styles and some scripts, or maybe like switching from jQuery, again, like you saw this carousel component, right, on the main page, which just made these blocks one upon another. It's done with jQuery on the original website. If that was React, even client-side React on the original site, it would show properly. It would be immediately working carousel. But because of jQuery, it cannot pick up the reference. I mean, it conflicts and it just shows them. But it still correctly identify the component. It correctly identified data sources, like everything taken and kept as is. So my objective was to make this migration simplified. Again, the effort shifts to the producing this framework, but once you have it in hands, then working with the further websites is like a piece of cake. So if you give me now any XM Cloud, I can convert it like that, and then it will be there, like the scope only for addressing front end and the bespoke logic. Again, you will not get away from the components or from modules that are not supported any longer. Search is a big question. But I have on the second stage, I have a wise idea how to apply search. With search stack is much easier to do, but with Sitecore search is also possible, despite it's not that easy as it goes with search stacks. Then a couple other things, forms I mentioned. You, of course, have to recreate that manually, but you would have to recreate that manually regardless if you do the website by your own without automation. I'm just taking away 80% of effort that are monotonous, useless, and that is just not intelligent one, dummy enough to get automated.
Yeah, I think some of the large sites I've seen, like the thousands of pages, they're not always complex as far as like logic behind, but there are a lot of pages that there are different pages. So this could be like time saver. So here, for sites like that with thousands of pages, you can save 95, 99%, I presume, right? The more the larger the site is, the more valuable this gets, I think, right?
True.
So this is really cool stuff. I mean, I actually learned a lot. I didn't knew that there's difference between how you look at layouts between like XP and XM Cloud. So it's a very good presentation, Martin, as always.
Thank you, Boris. Yeah, my discovery was, again, if I knew all the difficulties I would face during this working on this framework, I would not even start, because it appeared to be way harder than I expected. My biggest discovery was that XP has totally different way of arranging presentation than XM Cloud, because the guys had to invent this layout, rendered layout JSON for XM Cloud when they originally introduced it. And again, with these placeholders being set to the renderings, There were like couple tricks that without them, it's not possible in principle, which I had to find meanwhile.
Well, so this is amazing anyways. Like I think not just that you learn a lot, but this definitely should put Sitecore and start looking at this for like and start offering it to everyone that they can. This is great stuff. Thank you, Martin.
The good usage of this I see, let's say now in 2025, we have a huge backlog of companies with their websites. I know from what I know, there are several hundreds of them who want to go to XM Cloud, and I believe Sitecore want them to be on XM Cloud as well. The problem they face, they cannot do this migration themselves. So they go to the Platinum partners or other partners, regardless of where they go, especially in case with Platinums, they will set up huge bills to them. I met some 7-digit sums for, of course, much larger sites than Habitat, obviously larger, which involve lots of things, but administrative cost for running all of that, communication overhead, developer learning curve, like all of that combined in a huge 7-digit sum. While with my approach, it allows you to speed up. Imagine I have a pipeline of numerous XM Cloud projects go to market. So I help these companies to save, stop this ticking bomb of the license expiring, start benefit from XM Cloud straight away, learn the new platform while having all the website. And again, even if they even prefer not to go with a fully AI-driven approach, yes, they will, let's say they stuck with the old one. It's a balance actually for companies. If they allow us to use AI, there will be less manual work afterwards. If they want to do, if they're very secure, if they don't want none of their stuff coming outside of the perimeter, in that case, well, there will be more labor to it, but the result will be anyway that same. They will go to XM Cloud with that site. Maybe it will be more difficult to maintain. Like again, if you prefer AI-driven approach, you will, and you have the source code, then you will have this source for CSS, and you can compile them right into the target folder, which means you can modify your stuff. If you just compile CSS and drop them as the binary files there, not much changes you can bring at least into scripts or files, but at least your site shows up and you can manage the content and you can do it all. That's already a big advantage. So the time bomb of the license stopped ticking, and you can now think about how would I do redesign? Maybe I want to do something totally different. So this is a great change for the companies and for Sitecore, because they have an opportunity to put as many clients to the Sitecore as they only can.
That's so cool. So what they need is to get free trial license of XM Cloud, and here we go. Problem solved. And
companies now can use 2 weeks trial license. That's a big case.
Yeah.
The other thing is that right yesterday there was a release of Content SDK, which I mentioned. Now it's on version 1, and that alone is a big news for this user group, because it's headless user group in first place, which means you can use it now commercially. It's not like a beta, it's not like 0. They made it silently like they usually do, but you can use it. It's version 1. This is lightweight version of GSS SDK exclusively for XM Cloud. So my next step would be to switch this POC to use specifically that version of SDK with metadata editing and with lots of bells and whistles. I want to try it against numerous websites, as many as possible, of course.
Yeah, that was very great presentation and great insight of migration. And yeah, definitely would be nice if more companies will come and do Sitecore migration from XP to XM Cloud, because this is, yeah, I think this is a huge potential for work potential coming for companies. So, you know, for us as developers.
So if I do some rough estimate based on what I know about this Habitat website, the conversion, so what you've seen in 12 minutes is somehow 2 months of work 2 months of labor for converting things manually. So you see 2 months, you compress 2 months of work in just 12 minutes. Can you imagine that? It's insane.
Sure is.
Any more questions? As a good reminder, there will be a following user group on 7th of August, very shortly from this one, maybe in a couple of weeks. I'm looking for a couple of speakers. Whoever wants to be a presenter, let me know. I will always host you. Once again, thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you. Thank you for,
attending.
Yeah, amazing presentations. Yeah.
Thanks, Luke, for coming.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
For presenting.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Great presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.